Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran jazz guitarist Grant Gordy. We spoke with him on June 7, 2020 about quite a bit, like his latest 2020 CD, Interpreter, during the COVID-19 world lockdown. After 6 incredibly fortunate years as a guitarist with the legendary David Grisman with his quintet and sextet, he is moving on and focusing on other pursuits. Get to know him and dig this interview.
A, seeking me out, and B, for the time, I'm glad you found me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. Happy to. Thank you for being interested.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, I'm always interested in all of you cats that have new music coming out. So thanks for reaching out. It's a weird time on the planet. Where are you at? How are you holding out?
Well, the first answer to that is quite easy. I'm in Brooklyn. And the second part is much more complicated.
Oh, my God.
Depends on, I mean, generally, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Obviously, nobody has any gigs, but thank God I've been able to continue teaching online, and that's kind of keeping me afloat for the time being, or has been for the last few months. And then, of course, so much is going on in the city and in the country and in the world, and that's a whole other deal.
You have a new album, and it's coming out during a time of a global pandemic. We have all of these things that are happening. I guess my bigger thing is that, when I was really kind of, getting into doing a lot of interviews with musicians, I had to make a choice during this pandemic. What am I going to do? And it was really hard at the beginning, and then I decided the best thing for me to do is to reach out and talk to all you cats. And now, as we've gone into 3 months into this, it's not merely how are you doing with this pandemic and having no shows and a massive economic down spiral for the next, however long this goes on. We now have a total upheaval of the world burning. And so my question is that, releasing an album during this time when people have more latitude to listen, but juxtapose that with the fact that you can't do any of this live. Talk to me a little bit about any feelings of ambivalence you might have about that.
I didn't know that this was all coming, when obviously a release of a record is a long-planned thing, and especially if you're doing it all yourself, which I did. And I should say it's on a label, but I did all of the actual work of putting out myself. And so, obviously I had no sense of where we were going to be with everything when I started working on this record, which was over a year ago. It was a year ago in the spring. And then, and even when it first, when the release date actually came, it was still just on the precipice of things starting to change. So I guess I kind of just threw up my hands and I said, well, I'll be glad that it's out there, and I hope that people will take some time to check it out. So that's the sort of the larger picture, and then there's the part of it for me specifically, and kind of where I sit with my kind of career and what I tend to do musically. I don't know if you know about any of this, but most of my work is in the kind of like roots music world, sort of bluegrass and related music. So making a record of this music, which I have loved and worked on so much for such a long time, felt like a pretty important thing for me. I don't know, and just in kind of my like personal musical growth. And so it felt like it felt like a departure from what I've typically done, the kind of music I've tended to release and be a part of on record has almost all been like on acoustic guitar and related to kind of more folk music and so I guess that's all to say that like I didn't really know what was going to happen with doing this record anyway, insofar as I have an already existing audience, which, albeit a small one. But it's interesting because, like, yeah, I mean, I obviously didn't even have a chance to try to do any touring behind it or anything. And of course I bought a bunch of CDs that, I play a lot of gigs. I'm on the road about a third of the year. So I was looking forward to having a new CD to tour with and get it out that way. But of course that's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so I think, there's a degree of just kind of dealing with what's coming up in the moment. It's like, okay, need to make some adjustments, and yeah.
Well, talk to me a little bit about your roots and kind of where you were born and raised and how, music became your life.
Yeah, I grew up initially in Portland, Oregon, although I ended up moving around quite a lot, so I lived in a few different places. But my dad is a guitar player, and he gave me a guitar when I turned 13, and didn't really say, I'm going to teach you how to play anything or anything like that, but basically just handed it to me and left me to my own devices. And like I said, my family, we moved around a lot, and I wasn't, I was never very academically inclined, or really we didn't really get particularly settled into any community for very long. And I think just for various reasons, I never really had an opportunity to get into formal music study. I didn't do lessons or anything growing up. And I sort of diverged from the academic path pretty early on, which I kind of regret, but I didn't know any better at the time. And so I spent a lot of time just sitting in my room by myself in various places where I lived, and trying to copy stuff off of recordings, and initially it was I knew about bluegrass music when I was growing up, because my dad was pretty into bluegrass, and also became aware of your kind of standard classic rock and that kind of stuff, and so kind of blues based, very guitar centric vocabulary was really centered for me, and so I acquired a love of blues and R&B, and eventually when I started really kind of hanging with people, finding musicians to play with, I'd been a little more interested in bluegrass and interested in people like David Grisman and Bela Fleck and the kind of the more sort of progressive end of the bluegrass world. And I started to meet people that were, that were into that music. And the wonderful thing about bluegrass, I don't know how much you know about that scene, but there's a really great, non-professional jamming culture with that music that I think, from what I've read, was, certainly was really, there was a lot more of that in kind of early jazz, or earlier, sort of before, or maybe earlier part of the 20th century, and I really appreciate that about the bluegrass world. Is it can be pretty easy to find people to jam with and find people that are sharing ideas, and then once you kind of dig into that music, you might meet some folks that are really into Django Reinhardt and swing music, and then you might meet other folks that are, that are taking a cue from David Grisman and Tony Rice and exploring Wes Montgomery and all this other music. So it became kind of this branching off point for me to get into this, this folk music, this folkloric, very casual, non-professional. There's certainly a professional side, but non-professional music, and that really helped to stimulate just the love of checking out a lot of different kinds of music, and ultimately that just sort of being always interested in improvising, particularly, and always really interested in harmony, in particular as well. I think that just kind of naturally led me down the path of like getting interested in jazz, and I started meeting people that were that were doing that, and started trying to hang out at jam sessions and stuff like that. And during this time, in kind of my late teens and into my 20s, I was living in Colorado. I was living in Denver, and just started to try to get involved in the jazz scene there locally, and met some really wonderful people that kind of helped me get involved with jam sessions and kind of the local gigging scene, and that was really important for me because it's there's a musical culture just like there is with any other kind of music, and I started to try to transcribe people and learn standards, and it just only deepened my interest in this music, which has just kind of flourished internally for all these years. Even though I'm, like I say, my professional scene has mostly been kind of on the bluegrass festival circuit, and I've played bluegrass or sort of like jazz influenced bluegrass and acoustic music all over the world. But yeah, I've mostly kind of lived in that scene professionally, and when I play like electric guitar, standards gigs, or kind of more modern jazz kind of stuff, it's always been a little more on the side and more kind of in town on the local scene when I'm not on the road. And anyway, and I've just sort of continued with all that stuff, and I moved to New York about 8 years ago, and I've been kind of doing the same thing and trying to be involved as much as I can in the jazz scene here. Get together, have sessions with people and go out and always trying to sort of balance that with what I'm doing on the road, both with touring and now I do a lot of teaching as well. So that's pretty much my life story.
I like it, man. What do you like the best about being a musician?
That's hard to say because I don't really know what it's like to not be one. A thing that I'm really grateful for is the sense of like non-genetic family that I've found like all over the world, and people that I've come to love really dearly. They say like chosen family are people that I've met through music, and the sense of being a part of a lineage of I ended up playing in the band of this mandolin player named David Grisman, who's a guy whose music I've really, early on I really freaked out about, and I was really into all these. He had all these people who went on to become names in that scene in their own right, and eventually I got to be in the guitar player role for that band, and so the sense of like continuity of being a part of this this lineage of like apprenticing with this guy and this band felt really, really good to me. So there's just this large sense of community around the world that I think musicians really share, and they really look out for each other, and tend to have similarly goofy senses of humor a lot of times, which I appreciate. And so I guess that's a big one that I'm really grateful for. I also like that it's, music itself. I'm assuming you play some music as well, and it's a thing that just it will always be there to welcome your attention. If you you have to deal with life and paying the bills, and sometimes protesting and speaking up in the world, and sometimes when you have time to just sit and be with music. At least what I find is it's this thing that is it always is. There's always more to discover. It's always like deepening. And that's just, I love that. It's like this never-ending source of fascination and comfort.
So let me ask you this. We're going to get to the end of this COVID-19. We're going to get back to the stage. What do you hope both the musician and the audience realizes from this time away from music?
That's a good question. I mean, I got to say, a thing that I have been really appreciating with this time is, and I should add the caveat before I say that it's a privilege that I've been able to continue to teach. You know, I teach a lot of lessons online, and I've been able to kind of move forward with that and not hit the margins too much, even though I've lost obviously all of my work for the foreseeable future. So I feel, like I say, like there's a degree of privilege that I don't feel completely just freaked out at all. But having said that, like I really have been appreciating the break from the hustle, because being a musician is a hustle. Like, you have to always be, you know, booking and dealing with travel arrangements, and you always have to get somewhere, and there's a lot of minutia that goes into just keeping the ship afloat, and having a little bit of a break from that is having time to be at home and hang out with my wife and just live a more kind of localized existence for this period of time has made me appreciate slowness a little more in some ways, and I'm hoping that I can kind of carry that forward just for myself. And that slowness, you know, manifests in a lot of ways, like trying to release myself a little bit from the constant feeling of pressure that I always need to be doing something to kind of move my career forward, which is not why I play music at all. You know, it's not why I got into it in the first place. So I'm hoping I can just kind of loosen that grip a little bit, you know, from that feeling of like, oh, you always have to hustle, and still be responsible and, you know, cover my bases and stuff. But that's my wish for myself, and hopefully that can leave me a little room to be more spacious in music and be more thoughtful about how I'm trying to present art and music in the world. As far as other people, I mean, I just hope that people continue to love and support music, and especially, you know, it's one of the great things that America has had to offer the world is American music, and I hope that we don't kind of lose sight of that in the rush of going back to you know, normal life and restaurants and DJs. I don't know. I haven't thought about it that much, but that's one thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I dig it. That was a good answer. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Oh, boy. Well, I think that I am in a lot of ways I feel like I'm the same person that I was when I was starting to play guitar at 13. And I'm trying to figure out how to express music, how to express what sounds and feels good. And there's a lot of different avenues to that. And that's kind of number one. And I guess inherent in that is like people's expression of their humanity, trying to express, you know, trying to create a mood. There's something, you know, intrinsically personal in that. But I'm just trying to, you know, kind of figure out how to play music and you know, I'm very like self-critical, and I think that can obviously be a double-edged sword, you know, so that can spur us along in life in a lot of ways. And, you know, I'm always trying to figure out how I can learn more And I don't want to say be a better person, because I feel like that's such a flattening statement. It doesn't really mean that much, but I do want to learn more all the time. That's definitely been a driving force in my life all the time, and I certainly hope that I will never lose that value, because that's kind of been number one for me. And like I say, even though I kind of missed the boat on doing any kind of academic stuff, I think that's kind of the number one driver, is that I'm a person that likes to learn and wants to learn.
Perfect, man. Well, stay safe. Thanks again, and good luck with everything.
Thanks so much, Joe. Take care.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Grant for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.